Welcome back, viewers! In our last episode, Cassian's unmatched prowess led to a decisive victory over Crush, leaving the battlefield strewn with defeated adversaries. But the battle for Vilzone's dominance is far from over. As we embark on this new episode, Cassian finds himself facing an onslaught of relentless foes, each more determined than the last to challenge his reign. Join us as the fight for supremacy reaches new heights in the thrilling continuation of Cassian's journey. Witnessing Cassian's skill, Blackhand stands in shock as he steps forward to face Hammerman and Pointer. Seeing him defeat them all, Blackhand wonders who Cassian is to possess such overwhelming power and decisive moves. Trembling with nervousness, he realizes that Cassian, contrary to their expectations, has become the hunter and they are his prey. Meanwhile, Cassian leaps to launch an attack, yet, before he can do that, his foot gets ensnared in a sticky substance, trapping his entire body. Confused, he turns to find Binder, another villain, entangling him in her dark webs. Struggling to break free, Cassian declares the webs won't stop him, but Binder laughs, claiming his efforts are futile. At that moment, Cassian realizes he can't use his powers, let alone move, because of the poisoned webs. Seizing the opportunity, the other villains proceed forward to launch simultaneous attacks. Pointer makes the first move, lunging at Cassian with his spear, but Cassian swiftly defends himself by gripping the weapon. While Cassian is preoccupied, Iron Mask strikes from behind, causing him intense pain. At the same time, Juak seizes the opportunity to deliver a powerful blow, leaving Cassian numb with agony. Crush adds to the onslaught by attacking from the side. The combined efforts overwhelm Cassian, leaving him powerless on the ground amidst their curses and roars. As he lies on the ground amidst the villains, Gangu's voice begins to echo in his ears, taunting his weakness, and asking if that was all he had to show. This causes Cassian's frustration to mount. He compares his attackers to the bullies who caused Gangu's death and the psychers who led to his own demise, fueling his anger. Suddenly, the villains attacking him freeze in bewilderment and Moros is shocked as they see Cassian's eyes glowing with a fierce intent, radiating a surge of power they had never witnessed before. Meanwhile, Driver, Crow, and Red Eye head toward the location of the fight. Seeing Driver appear increasingly worried, Crow advises him to stay calm, saying he's overreacting and things will be fine. Driver expresses relief if the situation isn't too intense, hoping nobody gets hurt. Suddenly, they hear a loud commotion, which leaves Crow and Red Eye surprised. Driver, who appears less shocked, comments that this was what he expected, seeing buildings getting destroyed in the distance. Meanwhile, the villains are shocked, unable to understand what's happening as Cassian rises to his feet, emitting powerful energy, weakening the webs binding him. Seeing this, Binder turns to Juak, revealing that her powers are not working on Cassian anymore. Despite this, Juak urges them not to hesitate, moving forward to attack, claiming that Cassian is still an easy target for them. Just then, Cassian gives her a deadly glare, breaking the webs, ensnaring him and launching countless shadow slices in different directions. With a single move of his hand, he sends the villains tumbling backward and crashing to the ground. Shocked and unable to believe in his prowess, Juak watches as Cassian speaks up. Overwhelmed with anger and frustration, he declares that he has to seek his revenge and cannot die in a place like that. Observing everything from a distance, Driver stands in surprise as Crow remarks that Cassian does not seem to be the same person they met before. Agreeing, Driver reveals that his magic points are currently over 2,000, something which greatly shocks Crow and Red Eye. Red Eye comprehends the implications of such immense magic points, fearing the potential for catastrophe. Expressing her worry, Crow asks Driver to do something, remarking that Cassian cannot be left like that, but he remains silent, watching the destruction spread around. Growing increasingly concerned for Cassian's well-being, Moros calls out to him, telling him to get a hold of himself while reminding him of his motive that needs him to be sane. Worried about Cassian's berserk state, Moros continues to call out until Cassian finally responds, asserting that he is in his senses. Smirking, Cassian asks if Moros expected him to lose his senses just because of his temporary state of berserk. Pointing to the DSP on his neck, he tells Moros never to underestimate his willpower, causing him to realize that it was all because of this device that he remained sane. Seeing him, Driver also becomes relieved, realizing that he has come back to his senses before the destruction could spread around. Analyzing his abilities again, Driver becomes surprised to realize that the moment Cassian comes to his senses, his magic points have gone down by half in a matter of seconds. This makes him wonder whether the surge of power was temporary. Worried about Cassian's well-being, Morose asks if he is all right, and Cassian reveals that he does feel a bit dizzy. Turning to the villains, Cassian then asks whether they still want to fight him. In response, Duak is about to say something when Blackhand gets up, accepting the defeat on behalf of the villains. Frustrated, Duak states that he has no right to say that, telling him to speak for himself if he is scared. Enraged, Blackhand seizes her by the neck and delivers a hard blow, stating that ganging up on Cassian was already bad enough and she should have the conscience to accept defeat. While Duak expresses her frustration at that, Blackhand declares that she can talk to Driver if she wants to continue the fight, gesturing towards him standing nearby. Seeing Driver, Duak is taken aback, while Cassian, still feeling dizzy, approaches him. Driver turns to Cassian and announces that he has emerged victorious, commending him for passing the test. Upon hearing this, Cassian looks at him skeptically, asking if he really performed well enough. Driver confirms, asserting that Cassian is now part of the group. Delighted, Cassian smiles and leans on Driver's shoulder, stating that he can sleep there for some time if that is the case. Drained of energy, he then succumbs to unconsciousness. Sometime later, Yuri lands in Philadelphia and texts Cassian, informing him that she has safely arrived. However, she does not get any reply, which causes her to think that it must be nighttime in Korea and he should be asleep. While she is thinking that, she suddenly notices a person holding her name board, standing at a distance, waiting for her. Coming out of the airport with him, Yuri sits in the car when the person introduces himself as Sean, asking if she wants to stop by her studio on the way, and she agrees. Fastening her seatbelt, she expresses her curiosity about what the manager is like, to which Sean states that he is a really hard-working person but is currently on a business trip for 10 days. In the meantime, he tells her to ask him if she has any problem, and she thanks him in response. Meanwhile, Cassian, still unconscious, dreams of his time at the orphanage. In his dream, he expresses his desire to Jeff to become a psyker like him. In response, Jeff reminds him of Cassian's previous aspiration to be a cool villain. Cassian acknowledges that this was when he was a child and unaware of many things. Jeff then asks why Cassian wants to be a psyker, to which Cassian replies that he wants to fight for justice. Hearing this, Jeff smiles, noting that Cassian is still young, which frustrates Cassian. Jeff reveals that not all psykers fight for justice, which confuses Cassian. Seeing Cassian's confusion, Jeff explains that there are people on both sides of good and evil who fight for what they believe is right, and that is what fighting for justice actually means, leaving Cassian surprised. Patting Cassian's head, Jeff tells him that sometimes the norms established by people can be wrong, and what they consider right may be far from the truth. He expresses his desire for Cassian to be someone who does the right thing, even if he doesn't become a psyker. During this conversation, Cassian suddenly hears Morose's voice calling out his name and opens his eyes, finding himself in Driver's room. Still feeling a bit dizzy, Cassian holds his head and turns to Morose, asking if he called his name. Before Morose can reply, Driver enters the room, surprised to see Cassian awake. Meanwhile, in the Korean branch of Lampus, Kim Woo-chan walks down the corridor and stops in front of a room, giving a knock. Opening the door, he enters the room to find Daewon sitting on the floor in the dark. Turning on the lights, Kim Woo-chan walks over to him and asks what he's doing in the darkness. After a moment of silence, Daewon calls out his name and turns around, revealing his cherished sword. He expresses that he can no longer feel the magic it once held and bursts into tears. Daewon explains that it feels as if the soul imbued in the sword has been drained, rendering it lifeless. Blaming Bloodrain for this, Daewon expresses his anger and vows to make him pay, while Kim Woo-chan remains silent. Meanwhile, Driver takes Cassian to the Heaven pub to treat him as a congratulation for passing the test. Driver also reveals that he has punished the villains who fought against Cassian during the test, causing Cassian to be reminded of their cruelty once again. While he is thinking that, A mouth-watering steak is served before him. Its appearance alone elicits surprise. Turning to Chea, Cassian asked if their service is always that excellent. Chea responds that it's a gesture of congratulations for Cassian's new role as the Villzone's boss. Upon hearing that, Cassian turns to Driver in astonishment, deeming it somewhat sudden. Driver explains that Cassian has earned it through his solo defeat of numerous powerful villains. Expressing reluctance to take on the role of managing the Villzone, Cassian protests. However, Driver reassures him, suggesting that he can handle it on Cassian's behalf. Hearing that, Cassian questions whether Driver intends to appoint him as a fake boss. Driver clarifies that this is not the case and they genuinely need a powerful and charismatic leader like Cassian. Nonetheless, Cassian argues that the other villains may not readily accept him as their boss. Agreeing with their opposition to his decision, Driver still refuses to retract his words, stating his belief in Cassian. He insists that he sees it as the right thing to do, something which reminds Cassian of Jeff's words in his dream. Meanwhile, Driver shifts the conversation to Cassian's villain name, mentioning he has some suitable options in mind. However, before he can elaborate, Cassian finally reveals his real name, Cassian, causing both Driver and Chea to react with surprise. Considering that the top-class psyker Cassian no longer exists, Cassian decides to adopt this name for his villain persona seeking revenge. Thus, he openly declares his villain name as Cassian. As Driver declares Cassian as the new boss of Villzone, a ripple of change sweeps through the underworld. But amidst this transformation, Cassian's revelation of his true name stuns them all. Stay tuned for the next episode, where Cassian embraces his newfound role and sets the stage for a thrilling saga of vengeance and redemption.